Welcome to Marketing Brew Weekly, where we chat about everything that's surprising and delighting the marketing world this week. I'm Jenny Mywin, reporter here at Marketing Brew.
I'm Kelsey Sutton, editor.
And I'm Katie Hicks, senior reporter.
Today, we're talking about podcasts coming to Netflix, Apple's new, kind of not new, streaming identity, and a very fashionable social trend that some brands are hopping on. Ready? Let's go.
So last week, we talked about the $1 million friend AI campaign that was getting absolutely defaced on the subway platforms. Well, now Heineken is joining in. Have you guys seen these billboards they put around the city?
They are so fun. So Friend AI is a wearable tech necklace, Tamagotchi type thing. And Heineken
Definitely caught wind of the hate.
Yes, definitely caught wind of the hate. And they posted a big billboard with a bottle opener that looks kind of like the Friend AI wearable.
And the tagline says, "The best way to make a friend is over a beer. Heineken, social networking since 1873.
I think this is so fun. And I think it's I want to know how fast this was able to be turned around. Heineken, we want to hear from you.
I mean, it's impressive, especially because like the original Friend campaign was all out of home. It was $1 million in the subway, and this is also out of home. And they were like, we're hitting back exactly how they did it. What's interesting to me is like, I'm curious how well the strategy of like kind of poking fun at another brand works out for Heineken. Like, does it make them seem like they're in on a joke and they get it, and everyone else is like hating on Friend AI, so like they are positioning themselves as like, we get it, and also our product happens to be the antithesis of this? Or does it make them look like a bully or a bad guy? I don't know. How do you guys feel?
That's such a good thought, because I think that we often talk about brands want to seem very personable and fun. And one easy way of doing that is saying, okay, what's the discourse? How can I be part of the discourse? But if the discourse is part of like a hating on another brand discourse, I think that can be like, that's perfectly fine. You are allowed to see an ad for Friend AI and be like, I hate this. When you're a brand doing it, like, we have to remember there's a huge corporation on the other side of that keyboard, making that choice. And I think that it can kind of go both ways, because on one hand, my immediate thought was like, this is so relevant to the conversation in New York around these Friend AI ads. People are talking about them, they're seeing them, and people largely don't like them because they don't like the message that it's sort of saying. And Heineken is taking advantage of that. On the other hand, it's like, okay, but you just want us to buy your beer. Like, are you really our friend? I don't know. There's something kind of interesting.
I think it works, to your point, like in this specific demo and knowing that it's like a niche audience and this audience, like, I mean, there was a protest against Friend AI this past weekend where people gathered and were like defacing more ads. So I think Heineken running these ads in New York City specifically works, because we all have seen these ads at this point. And like, I think if it was a national campaign, it wouldn't play well, but if you're really trying to target a New York City audience, I think it works. And another thing that I think is interesting is just like emphasizing like, hey, you don't need to wear a friend necklace, like an AI friend necklace. You can like get a beer with like an actual friend. Like, I have to wonder if this is kind of the start of brands like positing themselves as like anti-AI, or like trying to encourage like real world connection as part of their marketing strategy. And like, just given some of the discourse we've seen, I think people are going to respond potentially positively to that.
Yeah, I think you're so right. And I think that this is probably just the beginning, like pro kind of connectivity, pro authentic connection.
Which is, I feel like, a big thing that like alcohol brands have always hit on, because it's like, what is the positive side of alcohol drinks? It's like social connection and getting together. So not surprised that Heineken in particular did this, but interesting that they have like this like AI sentiment to like back it up against, to kind of like freshen up that message that I'm sure they've been hitting for ages and ages.
Yeah. At the end of the day, you can't cheers a necklace.
That's true. Before we get into the next topic, let's talk about the sponsor of today's episode, Digicom.
Digicom is a digital marketing agency, and they work with e-commerce brands like Mind Body Green, like Ever-Eaten, David's Toothpaste. What they do is use scientific creative testing and multi-channel executions to get 10x level breakthroughs on ad platforms like Meta, Google, TikTok, Outbrain, and Taboola.
So Digicom really plugs in as a brand's head of growth. They'll handle things like budgeting and planning. They can do creative production for paid ads using your assets, and they can even do media buying. But first they conduct an audit to map the metrics that matter for a brand, whether that's hook rate, watch time, click-through rate, conversion, or revenue.
For Marketing Brew listeners, that's you. Digicom is offering a free, no BS paid media audit. They're going to spend 10 plus hours diving into Meta and Google, do creative testing, and look for ways to optimize your conversion rate. And then they give it to you in a 90-day action plan.
To get your brand's free paid media audit, go to digicom.io/brew. Again, that's digicom.io/brew. Okay, I want to talk about some really interesting news in the streaming world. Do you guys listen to podcasts on Spotify?
Maybe this one?
Only this one, yeah.
This one exclusively every week. We hope you're all listening on Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. So podcasts are coming to Netflix next year for U.S. listeners. To be more specific, it is a select number of Spotify video podcasts. They're coming to Netflix, and they're all from The Ringer Media, which Spotify owns. So it's going to be different types of podcasts ranging from sports shows to culture shows, true crime. What do you guys think about this? Are you going to be listening to your podcasts on Netflix?
I don't know. I'm curious to see how this plays out. I feel like the strategy here is to get the passive listening audience involved in Netflix, because podcasts, at least to me, feel very passive. They're not something that I necessarily sit down and watch the video, but I will play it in the background and have it running while I'm doing something else. So I feel like it'll be a learning curve if I do start watching on Netflix, because in my mind it's more of a thing for mobile or YouTube, not necessarily sitting down, turning on my TV and watching a podcast.
Yeah, I feel like they are trying to position podcasts as more of this sit-down activity. I feel like as video has become more and more common in the podcasting space, I feel like they increasingly get compared to talk shows, and putting a talk show on Netflix makes sense. And I feel like that is something that they're trying to lean into with this. I feel like from the consumer standpoint, it's kind of just another platform for you to get your podcast, right? Why not have another place that you could do it? But interesting that you now have so many options to tune into your favorite podcast hosts.
I think the thing that really stands out to me is, Katie, when you talk about the passive listener, that is so valuable for a platform that is trying to monetize with ads. Because if you are listening to an hour-long podcast and then you're listening to you're playing your favorite TV show, and then you're going back and listening to another podcast, and then you're watching live sports, there are so many ad breaks. There are so many ways for an advertiser to reach you. And so for a platform that is really pushing into ads like Netflix, we know they have 94 million users on their ad tier where they have ad-supported options. That was announced during their upfronts earlier this year. We know that they're really investing in this. And what we've seen them do is they're really trying out different types of content. We have the scripted series, we have the, unscripted shows. There's more and more live sports on Netflix, it seems, every year. They're trying to get a little bit further on their mobile platform. There's games. You're so right. And so it's sort of like Netflix's identity is kind of shifting. And I think it's a really interesting play. They're trying to me, this signals to me that they're trying to be a platform that really can be everything for everyone at any time. Mm-hmm. And that makes me think of YouTube, which we know is such a huge platform. Mm-hmm. And we also know that a lot of streaming services are kind of looking at YouTube and are going, okay, hold on a second.
Well, YouTube's been the number one streaming platform for a few years now, according to Nielsen. So I feel like, having gone to YouTube's upfronts this past year, I know podcasts were a big focus, that they were positioning themselves as hey, we have this thing that other platforms don't. We have your favorite podcast hosts who are also creators, and they're posting everything to YouTube. So it seems like Netflix is trying to come for a piece of that pie.
Yeah, I feel like the YouTube Netflix comparison is especially apt because as Netflix continues to pull more different types of content onto its platform, it appeals to that passive listener or watcher a little bit more. It's closer to what YouTube has kind of always done because they've had so many different varieties of content from its various different types of creators, and then podcasts, music videos, if that's what I used to go to YouTube for. But that, like, I feel like having so much variety of content is what keeps someone on one specific platform. Because it's like, if you get bored of your podcast, you can switch over to your reality TV show. You can switch over to your Bridgerton on Netflix. But if you're on YouTube, you can switch from one favorite creator to another one to a podcast. And I feel like they're getting closer and closer in terms of that. But it's kind of just like across streaming in general, everyone's trying to be everything, which makes it hard for them all to stand out from each other. But maybe it's good for people just trying to get all of their content in one place.
Yeah, and I guess you could kind of argue that YouTube is hitting back because, or I guess Netflix is hitting back because YouTube, you can watch movies and TV shows on YouTube too. I don't, but I know you can. Like, so maybe Netflix is just thinking like, what's the one thing that they have that we don't have, and they're kind of getting into that.
Yeah, I feel like the YouTube hitting back too is that like, you might think of YouTube for shorter content than movies, but they do also have like episodic content. I feel like a lot of creators on YouTube are like really emphasizing like, oh, we make like high production value quality like content as well, and that is episodic, so people will come back for these things. So it is also kind of edging into Netflix's game at the same time as Netflix is edging into YouTube's game.
And YouTube also just made it so that you could have like seasons of different series this year too. So like, yeah, they're definitely leaning into this idea of like pre-scripted, like episodic, very like series-esque shows.
I really think it is like the great convergence of media, because one of the things that these streaming services did at the outset is they said, we're not like TV. We're not. You can watch all the shows all at once. Like you can binge watch all of this. We're premium, etc. And now I kind of think that we're seeing all this sort of morphing together almost, right? Netflix is saying, come listen to creators, like watch podcasts, sure. Play games, sure. Like, do you want to have stuff recommended to you? Do you want to watch things weekly? Earlier this year, Ted Sarandos, who is the co-CEO of Netflix, said that they're kind of constantly looking at all different types of content. And he suggested that they want to work with great creators, quote, across all kinds of media that consumers love. And so to me, I think that indicates that maybe this is just the beginning. Are we going to see more podcasts available on Netflix or on other streaming platforms that are not Netflix as they try to look at what Netflix is doing and replicate any success that Netflix has? And then does that mean that we see more creators actually getting a space in these other places that are not YouTube or the social video platforms where obviously we see they have a huge
Which is that is happening outside, not yet on Netflix, but it's happening. I just wrote a story about YouTube creators coming to Delta Plains. So like that's a platform that they're getting onto. Tubi has like for a while now been partnering with YouTube creators to bring them there too. So I do feel like that type of content has been seeing more interest from other platforms for a while. And I feel like it just speaks to like this like constant craving of authenticity that everyone is searching for, audiences and marketers alike. And I feel like leaning into podcasts and creators is just one way that these platforms are kind of like seeking to fill that void or to create that type of offering for their audiences.
And of course, if you are watching more stuff on Netflix and you're spending more hours of your day or more hours of your week there, then if you are a marketer, you can reach that viewer, that listener again and again and again at these different moments. And that kind of builds a bigger, less fractured sort of experience, which I think is what a lot of advertisers are looking for is, can I reach the same people in different ways over the course of, this arc of time so that I can kind of move them toward a purchase.
Definitely.
I am curious to see, just as every platform starts having the same offerings and everything kind of converges to your point, like what's the next step? How are they going to start standing out? Because if you can find the same thing on every platform, how do you really differentiate yourself?
Right. Well, speaking of streamers trying to differentiate themselves, Apple TV has gone through a rebrand, guys. I actually just flubbed the way that I said that because it was actually previously Apple TV Plus, and it is now rebranded as Apple TV. Really
wait.
dramatic change.
Isn't that the name of their little square box connect to your
I'm
TV?
so glad you asked because it is. And I feel like, so I've started looking into a story on this actually, and I've been talking to a couple of branding, naming experts, and that is what a lot of them are getting caught up on is that Apple TV is the name of an existing Apple product. It is the little box that lets you connect to all of your various streaming services if you don't have a smart TV already. And now Apple TV Plus is just becoming Apple TV, which causes a chance for confusion. I get that concern, totally, literally the same name, but my point that I raise up against it is that aren't people already calling Apple TV Plus Apple TV? What do you guys call it?
Yeah, I don't think I've ever been like, hey, I watch this on Apple TV Plus. That's just too many syllables.
Yeah.
It's a lot of syllables. And I think that this really indicates to me a sort of streamlining of the branding. I think that something that's funny is calling something an Apple TV. It's like, okay, Apple is the modifier on TV, but it's like, okay, you're a consumer. It's TV. What does TV Plus mean? Like if you remove Apple from that, like what is that? Is that premium cable? Is that like an add-on? Like I think it's kind of confusing. The Plus signals something. And if you just buy an Apple TV and you watch on Apple TV and it's all Apple TV, it's kind of, it's streamlined. So it might be confusing, but I also think it just kind of indicates what it is. It's like you can get TV through Apple.
Right. It's kind of like any entertainment TV product can be offered through Apple, and that's what it's called. Kelsey, I know you actually wrote a story for Adweek in 2019 about like the actual meaning of the plus, because when streamers were coming onto the scene, it seemed like everyone was actually rushing to name their streaming product blank plus, ESPN plus, Disney plus, Hulu plus,
Paramount
right?
Plus.
Paramount Plus.
Yeah.
Walk us through what the plus like maybe used to signify, and maybe do you think that's changed?
I think it was a signifier of premiumness, sort of, a plus up, a level up, like you're familiar with this, but ooh, it's different. Disney has channels, Disney Plus. It was sort of like a streaming indicator, the plus as a signifier, but then it was also kind of a premium thing. That immediately became difficult. And again, when I wrote about this 6 years ago, branding experts noted how difficult this was going to pose a bunch of challenges, primarily because if you are a service with a plus and then you have different tiers, it's like, are you a plus plus? Are you a plus basic? Are you a plus, and
Negative?
Right. A plus negative,
Plus minus.
a plus minus. It's divided by, like it becomes very confusing. And I think that we've seen that really happen with the introduction of all of these different tiers, because some of these platforms did not roll out with ad tiers immediately. And then they now rolled out ad tiers a couple years later. You're stuck with the plus. So are you plus with ads, plus without ads? It becomes very confusing. And consumers talk all the time about how confusing the streaming world is anyway. Where is my show? It was there last month. It's not here anymore.
Around,
Which platform is it on? I don't remember the name of it. Does it have a plus in it? Also, just the SEO of it. I don't know if you've ever... How do you put a plus in a URL?
Yeah,
To then go
that's
to
true.
this. So
You're spelling out plus, but like, is that normally how it is? Yeah.
something that I think will be really interesting to see is if Apple kind of moves in this, they're moving in this direction, they're removing the plus, they're just skipping out on the math entirely. Are we going to see other platforms follow suit? What is that kind of rebranding or re-leveling? But I always think it's so funny when you see kind of a branding convention that emerges, like a company that had .com in the name was very trendy, 1-800 company name, all these things that kind of tell you about a very specific time. And I think that the plus is going to do that for us. And I think it wouldn't surprise me if we saw some brands go, we're just TV, and the plus is a signifier that's no longer serving us, and they're just going to they're going to subtract it ultimately.
Which we have already seen start to happen, not just with Apple, ESPN, the app, rather than ESPN Plus. There's confusion there about whether ESPN Plus is going to continue existing, but that's a whole nother conversation. So it is happening, but yeah, I feel like as streaming becomes like the way people watch TV, there's no longer a need to signify like, okay, we have TV, but we also have something that's more than TV, which is streaming. It's like
Streaming's a standard now.
yeah, they're all becoming the same thing. So it's like, why not just relate it back to like your main brand name and make it obvious that like you are in the streaming game. Also, in Apple TV, no longer the Plus, never had the need to signify that it didn't have ads because they don't have ads. I'm curious if ads may be coming. Who knows? It's possible, which would change that premium experience, not premium experience. But that's all speculation for now.
Yeah, I think it really is, as the consumer has become increasingly comfortable with streaming as the medium. And I mean, it's been a long shift, but it has happened that streaming does not need to be even like signified as, some special other thing. And as we were just talking about, Netflix having Spotify on there too, it's like there is this convergence. And so it's sort of like, you don't really need to tell people like what this is. If they know the brand, they know the shows that they're going to get or the movies they're going to get if they subscribe. So you don't really need to do all that extra work.
Yeah, it's really all about context clues. I feel like if you say like, I'm watching the morning show on Apple TV, it's like, okay, you are watching it on the streamer. I feel like if you're in the world of like watching content, you kind of know what you're talking about. So yeah, there's less of a need to be like, this is the specific streamer on this device, blah, blah, blah. It's all vibes at the end of the day.
I even feel like, I'm not like, I saw this thing on Instagram Reels.
Right.
TM. Like, I'm just saying, I saw this on Instagram, and so it's like the brand that wins out might just be the name brand, and like the product name is kind of less important.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, I want to transition us to a trend that we're seeing in the vertical video space, which is the rise of not man on the street content, but rather brand on the street content. We're seeing a lot of brands kind of get in on this trend that we're seeing on like TikTok, Instagram Reels of people asking people on the street what they think about certain topics, if they can identify a song, etc. And I think the Wall Street Journal just wrote about this. There are agencies cropping up that are specifically working with brands to make this content. Have you guys seen any of this stuff?
I have, and I always think how much B-roll, like how much cutting room floor there is. If somebody approached me on the street to speak to me, like I always thought, oh my gosh, if Billy Eichner ever ran up to me and tried to speak to me, I'd sprint in the other direction. Like that is my actual nightmare.
The infamous clip of like the woman who can't name a woman. We all laugh at it, but it could happen to you.
It could happen to you. So I felt like, at that time when that show was filming, I was like, okay, avoid these blocks. I know it's happening. But I think that it's so much of a time commitment. And that's something that the Wall Street Journal actually wrote about that I thought was so interesting is like, it is grueling work. And then at the end of the day, you get 30 seconds, 45 seconds of three people saying something. I think brands want that authentic, genuine reaction from a person. So running up to a person or hiring somebody to run up to a person and ask them something, interview them is a great way to capture real, genuine, authentic reactions to something. And yet we also know how much work is happening in the background. We know all the failed questions, the people who said, absolutely not, do not put that microphone anywhere near me. I'm not part of this.
Yeah, there's like legal aspects of it too. You got to get signed release forms. Yeah, you have to sort through all the content. You have to source the creators that you want to be the face of these videos. And I think there are brands like 203 Media is the one that the Wall Street Journal just wrote about, but there's also another one called Linkia, which has worked with brands like Prime Video and Zillow. They've worked with there's this one creator named Davis Burleson. He does like What's Poppin'. He has a series where he goes around Washington Square Park and asks people what their thoughts are on different things. And like he's partnered with brands through this agency. So yeah, it's kind of like putting it all together behind the scenes for the brands. They just have to be willing to put their brand name on it.
I think the fact that agencies are cropping up to do this specific type of work speaks to what you were saying, Kelsey, that it is a lot of work and they recognize that it's a lot of work, but they want that authentic nature of like running up to someone on the street and it feeling like none of it was planned and it was just so spur of the moment.
So spontaneous.
So spontaneous, so silly, so fun. But the reality of that for brands, like I feel like there's such a dichotomy there because like famously, brands plan everything. Like of course they're not actually running up to someone on the street, and they can't because the potential pitfalls of someone just saying whatever they want about your brand, they could totally like talk badly about the brand. They could totally say something that is not brand safe, and that's something you can't plan for if you're actually doing it true man on the street style. So I think the fact that they're hiring people to do it, they're like, it is actually a lot of work, and then like potentially putting like their vetted creators in front of it. They're potentially feeding like the right lines to be said about it. Really changes the nature of the original content. But like that's kind of what's necessary when you are ultimately creating an ad, but you don't want it to look like an ad. And I feel like that's always such like a thin line for brands to walk.
I think it's so interesting though, because like there's so many shows that you've already seen that maybe they're not all branded. Maybe there's a brand partnership occasionally, but you sort of, if you've watched enough of them, you sort of know, okay, wait a second, this can't possibly just all be serendipitous. Like the person who goes up and asks to see people's apartments.
Yes.
That has, or subway takes. Mm-hmm. We know that there is a lot of work behind the scenes that makes it look super authentic and super like, oh, this is just happening. And it's not. It's, there's a level of work and scriptedness that happens to actually set up the guests and make sure that people are there and everything that like that. But again, it's like, it's fun as a viewer when you're watching that because it feels like you could just be sitting on the subway next to somebody with an amazing take, or you could walk past somebody with the most amazing apartment you've ever imagined. There's so many of those. And I think it's because it's such a feel-good genre. It makes you feel like, oh, I'm surrounded. Like it makes you feel very empathetic and very like
part of the world.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Like, oh, I'm surrounded by cool people. And like, if I just listen to them for 1 minute or ask them a question, I'll find the most incredible story of all time. And I think that's one of the reasons why I think brands are probably so eager to align with that, because if you are a viewer and you're watching it, it makes you feel really good. And we know that feel-good content is a good place for brands to be because they're gonna, that halo effect, that good feeling that you have watching something like that is going to be transferred onto the brand name.
Brands also just want it to feel really organic and authentic. And this reminds me of this story I wrote earlier this year about street style accounts. And I talked to Watching New York and another account called OOTD.com, and they will work with brands and make it look like, what are the girls wearing in New York right now? And they'll have the brand dress models who will walk around and look like they're part of just, any normal street scene, but they're actually doing brand work. So I think the concept is based on the fact that like these accounts do normally just post organic content that looks like that. And the brands are like, how can we kind of insert an ad here that looks very natural that people won't necessarily register as an ad?
Right. And native content, as we know, has like been around in many forms in lots and lots of ways. But as soon as a consumer sees that ad and they see that it's labeled as an ad, they're very likely to navigate right away, versus if you're watching something and it's in your For You or on your For You page or in your feed in some way, like you are more likely to stick around, even if it is branded.
Yeah. I do think that the street style videos are such an interesting kind of like subsect of this type of man on the street, person on the street style, because those I feel like are less speaking heavy, and like it is almost easier to hide the ad within an ad of like someone's just wearing the outfit and someone just happened to see this, and it feels more natural. Whereas like as soon as I get like the guy who does the apartment tours or the guy that does the like guess the song, like it's
Trackstar.
Really, yes, Trackstar, thank you. Like it's very obvious when brands are involved in those. It's really hard to hide that, and also like obviously you should disclose that it's an ad, all of the legal ramifications.
But actually, what's interesting is I saw Ed Sheeran was like promoting his album the day that it came out, and it didn't say ad. It just was like
Ooh.
Ed Sheeran's guessing the song, and I'm like, I looked at the timing, and I'm like, it is the day that his most recent album came out. It was last month. but it wasn't an ad. It was
And
just,
is it
it's just Ed Sheeran being out in the world, but there's
Yeah.
definitely a strategy behind that.
right? It's like a late night. It's like the new late night.
Yep.
You know, it's not an ad to be there, but you are talking about
But the timing's opportune.
Yeah.
just to remind people that you're Ed Sheeran and that you exist.
Thanks so much for joining us today. And if you have thoughts on Netflix podcasts or brands on the street, send us an email at mkbw@morningbrew.com, which you can also find in the show notes. And we cannot wait to hang out with you again next week.